Many kids with selective mutism haven't had that choice because they never felt comfortable with another person to have a best friend. So if that's your goal, then let's work on that.
The more the kids understand, the more almost the resilient they become because they don't feel like a failure.
When you see that child for the first time say, I don't know, Cinderella in front of you, to have a voice outside their home, it's just so powerful, it's so meaningful.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unspoken Words podcast, a Selective Mutism podcast by the Smart Center, produced and published by New Edition Productions. This episode features a discussion between Dr. Elisa-Shipon-Blum and psychiatrist Dr. Natalie Weder on how to help young children bounce back from social and emotional setbacks. Dr. Natalie Weder is a board-certified senior child and adolescent psychiatrist in the Psychopharmacological Center at the Child Mind Institute in New York City. She has particular expertise in the areas of selective mutism, ADHD, mood and anxiety disorders, and resilience in children and adolescents. Dr. Weder completed her medical training in Mexico City, psychology residency at Yale University, and a child psychology fellowship at NYU. She has been published in several peer-reviewed journals, including Biological Psychiatry and the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. In this episode, Dr. E and Dr. Weder discuss resilience, reframing, recognizing micro moments of success, and more. Before we get started, if you have any question on anything you hear in today's episode, please head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask Dr. E, that's ASKDRE, and enter your question. The team reads all of your submissions and does their best to answer them on podcast episodes, blog posts, and on social media. Speaking of social media, for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, make sure you're following the podcast on Instagram and on YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast on Instagram and Unspoken Words Podcast by Dr. E on YouTube. All right, without further ado, please enjoy the latest episode of the Unspoken Words podcast.
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. E. Before we get started with today's episode, I'm so excited to announce that our popular Selective Mutism in the School virtual conference is now available as a self-paced online course. The conference dives into how to assess the mute child, testing for common comorbidities, and proven strategies and interventions to support students with SM within the school. And of course, we dive into accommodations and interventions such as 504s and IEPs. The course offers 5.5 continuing education credits for most professionals, so parents, share this opportunity with your child's school. To sign up, just head to our website or check the description in this podcast episode. Together, we can create a world where every child has a voice. Now, enjoy the episode. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Unspoken Words. I'm honored today to be with Dr. Weder from the Child Mind Institute, and very excited today to talk about a topic that is very interesting and probably something that people don't necessarily think about, but is so important. So welcome, Dr. Weder. I love seeing you. I know you treat SM, as do I. And I guess one of my biggest questions that I would say, resilience, like, let's define that for our audience.
I think of resilience, I think there are many definitions of resilience, but one of the ones I find very important in SM is this concept of overcoming obstacles, building skills to tolerate distress, to learn from adversity or difficult experiences, and to keep growing and adjusting to a changing environment and different, challenges that come our way.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that people don't even know to think about this topic. That's the interesting part. How did you get into this niche of a topic?
Well, I think it came from a different background. One of my biggest interests in child psychiatry was always child abuse. I did research on the topic. I worked with kids who had been abused, and resilience is such an important component of that, right? Because these are kids who have experienced all types of, challenges, many times coming from the people who are supposed to protect you the most in life. And as I worked more and more with kids with selective mutism, it made me really wonder of, these kids have also a different type of obstacle that they're facing, but it starts pretty early in life, right? This extreme fear of speaking, which is something we have to do all the time. And they're almost forced to build resilience at a pretty early age, and it's a constant encounter. And so in a way, resilience becomes incredibly important, particularly in this population.
Yeah, and I know a very sensitive topic to our listeners is the term abuse. So we want our listeners to know by no means are we saying that SM and abuse in the traditional sense are a connection here. We're just mentioning that that's how Dr. Weder got into this, because it is kind of like a niche of an interest. And I love it because I think it comes in so many different forms. I think a lot of children feel very alone. I think they feel very like they're a lone ranger out there when people really do misunderstand them. So they have to almost develop resiliency. But I also think parents need skills to help with that, because I think in my opinion, so many children, with that focus on speaking when they're not yet ready causes them to feel bad about themselves. And sometimes they fall. They're not able to do it. How do you work with parents in that capacity to really add in that support network and meeting them kind of where they're at?
Something that I find very helpful is psychoeducation. I really try to go into the biology of selective mutism or anxiety in general, because I feel like if parents can understand where this is coming from and why it is so important to give the child the appropriate skills and why it is important to sometimes do exposures, even though we know that the child might get anxious in the beginning, then it makes sense. Then it almost like it clicks, right? Okay, well, like if let's say my amygdala is overreactive and the alarm system is going off when it really shouldn't, and I want to retrain this alarm system, then I'm going to do it little by little, but you have to face the fear, otherwise you don't make progress, right? And so if they understand the framework behind that, if it makes sense to them, it's much easier for them to then like put these skills into practice and see progress from them.
So basically what you're saying is, which is the way I see it as well, is we train parents to kind of meet the kids where they're at. And by doing so, we're not unrealistic with expectations, but we're also not enabling them either. We're meeting them where they're at to help them grow and have that resilience. And because, I don't love the term SM because it's so much about speaking, but so much of this, as you're saying, is about understanding that unique individual. Like, what is it about them? What is it about them that's they're not speaking? And how do we meet them where they are? So I think, the setbacks of when you're changing environments and changing people and, people change, environments change is what I mean to say, is that their communication will change. And so if they're not able to speak in one environment and they're not able to even engage, but yet they are in another, it makes them feel like a failure. And failures are more like, well, what are we going to learn from this? Why is that happening? So how do you nurture that with the families you work with?
Well, something that I tend to do with a lot of families is share my own experience. I had SM symptoms when I was a child.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I do. That's part, and I have a daughter who also had the same symptoms. And
Look at us with the same exact background. I didn't have SM, but my daughter. So that's an interesting, I didn't realize that about you. Thank you for sharing.
Of course, no. But I think that for me, it's very easy to know what it felt like when somebody would speak to me, and I would just feel my heart racing and like literally like almost sweating, and nobody understood why. But then if I was talking to my girlfriends, I was the most talkative person. And so sometimes people feel like you're faking it, right? Or like it's like a choice. And you don't understand why it is that when the teacher tells you what's your name, you can't say a word, but with your friends, you're like all over the place, right? And so I think that understanding that many times the child doesn't really know why, especially when they're so little. Many times it starts when you're very little. You just feel it's like the startle response is profound and nothing comes out, right? I always tell my patients it's a little bit like when you're going down the roller coaster. There are some people who immediately start screaming, right? I cannot get a sound out of my mouth, no matter how much. It's like I just freeze, right? And I don't choose it. It's not something conscious. It just kind of happens to me, right? And so going over that, explaining that, and helping parents understand how little of a choice it is for the child and how little sometimes even understanding they have, but how we can work with them on overcoming that, I feel makes the kids feel like they're failing less, creates less judgment, but also creates like almost like a path that they can start following to get over the symptoms.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think, when children are nonverbal in a setting and they're not able to speak, let's talk about, the resiliency there. I think a lot of kids are trying to cope with the environment and they're going with it like they're not able to. So their resilience is just trying to be there instead of, they're basically shut down in that point. But I think it's knowing why they're shut down. And I think it's about learning that, like, is it a loud, large, lots of people environment? Is it the high expectation from the person in the environment? Is it that they have speech and language issues? Process it. What is the reason? And I think that psychoeducation, which you were talking about, is really important because then we can support the children. Then we can help them understand why. And when we're doing the goals, when we're doing the strategies, we're able to kind of say why we're doing them. I always find, I'm assuming you do too, that the more the kids understand, the more almost the resilient they become because they don't feel like a failure.
100%. And also, they feel less alone. Oh, there's such a thing as selective mutism. I'm not the only one. There's nothing strange about me. I'm not choosing to not speak. It's not, it's not fully under my control. All of that makes them feel understood, heard, but also hopeful.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's taking challenges and then like resetting it. So one of my questions is, let's talk about from the SM standpoint, like the core aspects of emotional resilience. I wrote to be able to tolerate the uncertainty of life. I mean, it's one thing to have your parents around to guide you, a 3, 4, 5-year-old, but as children age, it's difficult. And I think the tolerance and the uncertainty and the discomfort and being okay in your own skin, so to speak. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about, like, as settings change and the anxiety is there, how do you talk to the kids about that change and how they feel to become more resilient?
Exactly. I think that if we think about again, like resilience as facing an obstacle and like, winning, it's like with selective mutism, you have to like, the obstacle is your own biology. It's like for whichever reason your brain decided to feel to a 10 to make you feel like there's a lion in front of you when it's just a person speaking. Like it's much easier to calm down if you're a bit upset than if you're profoundly upset, or a bit anxious than if you're profoundly anxious. So these kids have to regulate very, very strong emotions that most people, if you ask them, they don't even feel anxious, right? Like, and now you're feeling like you're gonna die, right? And so if they understand that, and if we start little by little in terms of like the treatment process, and we make them feel safe, and they see a little success, then we're creating hope, right? Like, I don't know that I'll be able to talk to my teacher, but I was able to answer her question if I wanted red or pink, and nothing bad happened. And as I speak, and this vague like fear that I have doesn't come true, and I do it over and over, then I'm proud of myself, because I always think that you can tell a child that they're amazing and that they're best, and like you can whatever, unless I'm able to talk to you, I will never believe that. I have to feel it in my own skin. That's why it's so important to work in this setting where the child is slowly making progress. Because otherwise it's like, yeah, my mom thinks I'm best, but I don't really know that, right? And so as they do that, the resilience starts to develop, right? Like it's like they're investing in that, and it grows and grows and grows as they overcome more challenges.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, we all have different ways we come about it. I have found in my practice that using the bridge and the different stages has been very helpful for a lot of kids because they don't feel like failures, and that which causes them to kind of like feel shame a lot. And I think dealing with that shame and why can somebody do this so easily and I can't, and people placing expectations when they're not ready to do something can be hard. But I have found the bridge is helpful. So for me, the bridge gives them resiliency. So I may not be able to initiate. I can respond and maybe I use a parent as an intermediary, or I'm working on nonverbal initiation in this setting. Like it gives them a sense of control. So would you say that transferring control and giving these kids control helps with their resiliency? I do.
100%, 100%. Right? Like, I think you need, as you said, you need to meet the child where they're at, and then slowly build from that. And sometimes it's just like looking at you. Sometimes it's not hiding under the table. That's
Right.
a success, right? Like, or being able to play a game in front of you, even if they don't say a word. The goal is to reduce suffering and free them from anxiety. It doesn't just have to be like a word. It can present itself in many ways, right?
Yeah, no. And I think a big part is parent education. You said that in the beginning, but our kids tend to be very sensitive. They're very aware. They have emotional dysregulation, many of them, but they're highly sensitive, many of them. So they feel what the parents feel and what they're thinking. So they feel that it's projected onto them. So I think a big part of our work, I mean, I know it's a big part of our work, is really helping parents. I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but to really deal with their own frustrations and understanding of this, because if they're projecting frustration onto their children or disappointment, that doesn't help with resiliency.
And I think that's 100% right. And for me, the fake it till you make it, there's an aspect of exposures where you are like, I'm going to say something and I do not know what's going to happen, but I'm going to pretend that I can do it and let's see how it goes, right? I also think that if your child is anxious and you seem anxious, what you're conveying is, I don't believe you can't do it. I believe this is scary. And so we both should be scared and therefore you should continue to be scared. But if I'm calm and I'm saying, I understand how you feel and I believe you can do it, then I'm transferring a lot of power and self-esteem onto you, right?
Yeah, no, it goes along with, I tell families, adults, to avoid can you language. Can you do that? And I tell them to avoid you need to and you should language, because you need to and you should. And if they can't, create shame and frustration, depression, all that. But can you language implies doubt, and neither of the, and neither of those two extremes create resiliency. It creates disarray. It creates, I use the word shame a lot because I think that's almost the opposite of resiliency a lot of times. Like they just feel so bad about themselves and the way they present. So that fake it till you make it. And you know, when you're anxious, you get that flat affect. I see a lot of parents that get that almost like intense flat affect, and we have to help them reframe it. And I'm sure it's similar too with you guys at Child Mind. Like if we can give these parents hope, it changes who they are and
100%.
right? So giving them the hope, educating them, helping them understand why things are happening, it calms them down, which then transfers to their kids.
To add to that, I sometimes think that people believe like, my child has selective mutism because my child is insecure or my child doesn't have a strong self-esteem. My experience with most kids is that the symptoms start before they even have a sense of self, a narrative of who they are. They go to pre-K, somebody asks them their name, nothing comes out, right? And over time, as you get older and have this experience, you start you create your own narrative, right? Like, oh, I must do this because I'm not smart, or I must do this because something happened to me, or I must, like, it's more like you're trying to explain a symptom than the symptom not having been there before, right? Like, so for me, it's very important, the aspect of like, no, your child was wired to feel more and they have a stronger response. It's not that they're insecure or not. Over time, this can make them feel shame. This can make them feel that they cannot connect. But it's not that there was something wrong with them to begin with, and that's why they're having the symptom, right? Many times people believe, oh, you have anxiety or you have selective mutism because you're insecure, because there's something wrong with you, because like you don't have strong self-esteem. And I think it's the opposite. It's like you are wired to have very strong feelings of anxiety when a certain trigger happens. And it's typically before you even have enough words to explain it to yourself or to understand who you are, like this concept of like more metacognition, more abstract thinking, like this is who I am, right? And so as this happens and it happens repeatedly and you do experience shame or then you start developing like ideas to understand it. Oh, maybe I'm doing this because of that. Or you hear people say, oh, he's this, he's the other, right? Like, and so then it becomes an insecurity, but it starts more like a symptom that then has all of these kind of connotations to it, right? And so I tell parents, it's not like they were born insecure. This is a hard symptom to have. And over time, it became a source of shame but there was nothing like inherently insecure about them.
You know, the kids see it as like this big, like mountain out of a molehill. Talk, you got to talk. And when they can't, they don't feel great. One of the things we work with parents about is helping mention their positives, like emphasize positives and minimize their negatives. So yeah, using your words right now in a classroom with a class full of kids and teachers is hard, but look at all that you are doing. Look how strong you are and amazing you are at playing the piano and really taking a skill. So to help with resiliency, we try to create what we call big shot confidence building. So creating areas that they're confident and using that in the treatment. So they may help a peer. They may, be very, very skilled in an area, and we take those areas and we figure them out and we build on that to help their confidence, because I always say comfort, connection, confidence fuels communication. So when one of those pillars is missing, they're not comfortable, they don't have a connection to somebody, and they're not confident, they probably aren't going to speak.
That makes sense. Yes.
So we have to build all of those pillars to get that fuel for communication. So that's a big thing for parents to help kids become resilient because they'll feel proud of themselves.
For sure.
Yeah. And it'll help them bounce because they'll have more confidence when things get a little bit tough. So I think reframing things. So let's talk about that. Like reframing when something is difficult and the child doesn't do a great job. I think a big part of our work is helping parents not say you needed to, you should, but to be understanding and what can we do next time to help this happen, to help you make the progress, to help you feel good about this.
Totally. And I think that in general, like, let's say that, you ask me my name, I do not answer, and the parent says, we're not ready to talk right now, and we move on. I would not focus on that. I would focus much more on everything else good that happened that day. But also, like, if at some point you are able to say, my name is Natalie, then, wow, that must have been really hard and you did it. That's great. Right? Like, focus on the wins. Like, that's what matters, not like the times that you couldn't. Like, the child is already pretty aware that they couldn't. What's the point of, like, no, insisting on that?
Yeah. And that's where like explaining to the parents how they can, what we call bridge down. So if they're not able to answer, like you're preparing for common questions and they're not able to answer, what can we do to help them succeed instead of, all right, we're not going to do it, but let's just, hey, you can't do it. What if I asked you a choice and you lean in towards me? That would be a way that the parents can adapt. So I think one way to help the children feel successful and build that kind of resiliency to realize the fluidness of a social situation is to teach them how to adapt when it isn't going the way you think it's going to go.
And also that it's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
We're not ready to talk right now. We move on. And if I, as a parent, model that, nothing happened. We just said we weren't ready to talk. Or like we're working on a break speaking. Let's keep going. And I respond in a pretty casual, calm way. Then the child doesn't feel like it was so humiliating either.
So you weren't able to do that. That must have been hard. But look what we were able to do today. So It's like one step, maybe two steps forward, one step back sometimes. And that's just the way it is. And that's life in general. That's not even about talking and speaking and communicating.
Every single one of us has that, right? You're playing a sport. You miss three, but eventually you hit the ball. Like,
right. So I think we talked about like reframing setbacks. Is there any other advice you have or ways that you talk to the adults to help the kids reframe a setback to help them feel, better and more resilient?
I can think of several things. I think one really important one, which I think we touched on, is many parents have their own anxiety, to make sure they're addressing that. Because if I feel calmer, then it's much easier to then cope if I feel like my child is not doing well or my child cannot speak or whatever it is, right? Like, and then from my perspective, to start helping the child as early as possible. Because anything that's reinforced, either positively or negatively, sticks, right? So like if I'm able to talk to you, then every time I talk to you, I have so many opportunities to talk to you. It's really hard for them to go back to not talking, right? But if I have a lot of interactions with you and I do not talk, the more I have not talked to you, the harder it is to then kind of start talking to you again. And the longer I do it, the more this notion of like, I'm somebody who cannot speak gets really, really wired in my brain. So in general, if you have a concern, seek out help as early as you can, because it's much easier to then revert it versus many, many years of not speaking. It's much more wired in the brain then.
Oh, yeah. They're learning conditioned behavior. Kind of the rescue effect. One of the things I teach a lot about is something called the Selective Mutism triangle. You have one aspect where, if, let's say you're out and about, let's say you're in a restaurant. Simple example, everyone goes out to a restaurant, which is a great place to start with to think about. But like the waiter asks what you want. And sometimes parents give the answer. They say she'll have pizza with a, Diet Coke or whatever. The child's left out. But then, right? And then that's a lost opportunity. But then in addition, there's parents that'll be like, tell them what you want, tell them what you want. You're going to get a sticker or a goal, but they're not there yet. And they're 100%. Not prepared and they don't have the skills to know, write it and read it or, practice it, figuring it out, role play. And so it's kind of meeting them in the middle if they're not there yet. So I always want parents to understand that if they're not able to do it, that doesn't mean you just drop it. It means how do you adapt? And then the children to learn how they adapt as they get a little more cognitive in this process.
And to add to that, I think of hierarchy, right? Like we make a list of things where the child needs to start talking and we start with the ones that feel a bit easier, right? So like 1 to 10, 10 would be the hardest. threes, right? I try to stick with that, like repeat that same three until it becomes so easy that the child doesn't even work. Once that's really, really not an issue, then you move to higher level things, but not a million different things. Because a lot of kids with selective mutism do not like surprises. They don't like the startled response, right? So if you take me to the restaurant and I wasn't expecting that I had to speak, and all of a sudden you force me to, that's the scariest thing for them, right? It's like typically you tell them, you prepare, it's like a treasure hunt, or like there's a reward, like they know what's coming. You don't want to just shock them with a surprise, because that's exactly what triggers the biggest fears for them.
Yeah, no, that's why, like I always say, their acknowledgement and assessment, their awareness to what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, gives them that sense of control where they're not feeling like we're trying to, like they get surprised. There's something we do called like I Spy, also what action plans, helping them know who's going to be there, what can they ask, what's your answer, what can you ask? And they actually have to work it, because when they do, especially as they get older, because we deal with, I'm sure you do, older kids too, the more they know and they have that roadmap and path is very helpful. And that is what builds the resiliency, to know I have a tool to use. I think the biggest thing is not knowing what to do and how to do it. And if we can help parents and kids and teens understand all that, that kind of, the parents to know the skills, the exposures, the skills to support them, but the kids to know the games they're playing. And then little guys, it's as a byproduct of the games they make progress. But as kids get older, that cognitive nature to this, that awareness, and to be able to know what skills to use. What skills do I use? Do I write and read? Am I on the lookout for the questions? Do I bring out my action plan? So I find that gives the kids a sense of control. I know I just said a lot, but I guess I'm just thinking the more they understand, the more they get it, the more resilient they become.
And I think of resilience as skill building. It's all skills. So
Yeah.
the more skills you have and the more you find the skills effective, the more resilient you will be.
And I'm sure you see this with parents that you talk to, that they come in like everything's everywhere. They have no organization. And an example I give is, all right, you flew into Philadelphia. You didn't just get into a car and drive aimlessly. You put in Apple Maps where to go. So you knew to go 2 miles straight, 3 miles right. That's what this is about for you. This is about giving you a roadmap and giving your child a roadmap so that they understand. Now, of course, if they're 3, 4, and 5, the parents are helping create that through the silent goals they set up and the games the kids play. But as they get older, they need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Else they're going to resist their parents and everyone else.
Totally. And I also think that as they get older, we need to find something that's motivating for them, right? So, for example, like, let's say that you've always wanted to have best friends. Many kids with selective mutism haven't had that choice because they never felt comfortable with another person to have a best friend. So if that's your goal, then let's work on that. If your goal is just to have stickers, that works as well. But you need motivation, because this is really scary for them. It's not pleasant to do an exposure and tolerate the distress. But if you're motivated, then at least you see the purpose to this.
Yeah. And so as they get older, the more internal motivation is important, and the kids won't even open up about what they like, the internal motivation. Many are in denial because they've been so misunderstood and they don't understand. So when you start to really work with them, you start to figure out they do want this. And these are things they'd like to be able to do. And we're going to help you, meet you where you're at and help you. And then all of a sudden the kids start to open up, because I think they go into this kind of closed, I call it like a closed wall, because they don't feel safe. They feel misunderstood.
Correct.
Right. So the little guys are, the external motivation, but even for the middle agers, like the middle schoolers, I call them the middle agers, like having something to work towards and all the goals and games you're doing to work towards that. But then the internal motivation at some point has to take over as they get older, because otherwise there's, like you said, how many tokens can you give a 15-year-old? You can't.
Yeah. And many times, like the things you're talking about, like you need to experience how much fun a friend can be to want to have a friend. And so it feels a bit of theory to them. Like, well, I've never dated someone. I've never gone to the prom. I've never had but once they start experiencing that a bit, then all of a sudden they see the value to it.
So sometimes it's interesting you said that. One of the examples I give is like I had a 11 or 12-year-old boy I was working with, and he loved the Philadelphia Phillies. He loved the Phillies. He loved going to So I gave him a scenario. So let's say you wanted to go to the Phillies game and you were going there, but your dad or your mom, whoever was taking you, or had a phone call to make, but you needed to get the tickets. How would you get those tickets? Let's talk about how you would, in a very calm, matter-of-fact way, not in a like you need to do it way, but let's talk about it. And he really wants to go. And so sometimes I'll say, as he's struggling, perhaps, this is why you're here, because you want to go to that game. We're going to help you so that you're able to convey what you need so you can go to that game. It may just be a baseball game he wants to go to. He doesn't care about a friend.
If it matters to him, that's great. Whatever matters to them.
Hey listeners, we'll get back to the episode in a second. I want to tell you about Communicamp, our popular 3+ day intensive group treatment and all-day parent education and support program designed to help parents, children, and teens overcome selective mutism, social anxiety, and extreme shyness. Over 3+ action-packed days, your child or teen will engage in immersive activities guided by expert clinicians that build confidence and communication skills in a supportive, fun, and collaborative environment. Spaces are limited and spots book up fast. To learn more, please find Communicamp in this episode's description or head to communicamp.org and complete our interest form, and our team will be in touch. Let's help your child or teen find their voice at Communicamp. Let's get back to the episode. So let's talk about small wins. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about, micro moments of success. Like you said earlier, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be small little successes.
I mean, to me, I think that part of why treating selective mutism is so incredibly rewarding is because when you see that child for the first time, say, I don't know, Cinderella in front of you, to have a voice outside their home, it's just so powerful. It's so meaningful. I tend to be a bit silly sometimes, not with them, but like, let's say that we're playing memory, right? Like, and it's princesses. And I say the wrong princess, like, oh, I think this is Elsa. And you see the desperation, like, it's like, no, it's Anna.
Yeah.
Like, those type of things, like, and all of a sudden they were able to speak up, right? Like, it's, for a lot of people, it might be a tiny win, but for them, it's profound.
So that's something we do too. It's something called the Guess Who game. So sometimes the kids will bring these games with them to aunts and uncles and family, whatever, even with their teacher, and they like are excited because they know it better. And so that is all a great strategy that helps them come out and show off their knowledge.
Yes. But again, like, speaking is one of the most crucial things in terms of like human development and human engagement. So I don't think there are small wins in SM. I think any little thing matters. Like, it's like you're free from all of these fears about what's gonna happen. You were able to say something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we talked about the small wins. And how about ways that the kids can feel more in control by tracking or having games that they're writing and they know? How do you feel? Do you guys use that a lot, where the kids kind of know what they're doing to kind of keep track of their successes so that way they own it? Not the parents filling it out, but the kids.
A lot of the kids I see are too small to already be able to engage in that, too young.
Yeah.
But something that I find, for example, that it's a bit similar is, so let's say that they're working or making it up to get like an American Girl doll. What I like to do is I like to print it, like an image of the doll, and then cut it in pieces and make a puzzle. And so every time they earn something, they put a piece on the piece of paper. And so they're very
that's
motivated.
The same thing. I'm talking about the same thing. Some way.
So then,
yes.
But then it's so visual, right? Like, because I cannot wait to have the whole puzzle, which then would like translate into me getting my prize. And it's a way for them to keep track that's, age appropriate for like the kids that I typically see.
Yeah, no, I love that. They're putting the American Girl doll together in like a puzzle because visuals are so critical for them, and the tracking methods are some way for them to see what they're doing and all that they're doing instead of just focusing on all that I'm not doing. Look at all that I am doing, and having that sometimes we'll have different games for the little guys, like hand over takeover is one of the things. And after they get 10 of them, they get to look at, like, maybe they buy new shoes to go to the American Girl doll store before they go, or the tickets after they do so many interview games or something. So they're working towards the bigger thing of getting American Girl doll, maybe going to New York to the store there.
Exactly.
All these different ways of, celebration charts, as I call it. So let's talk about some things that really do occur. Like if kids don't have a voice yet, right? Because you see them like we do when they don't in many settings, and they're having difficulty fitting in with peers. And so it's not just about talking in general or communicating rather in general. It's about all the things that happen throughout their life because they're not maybe able to advocate for themselves. They're very dependent. An example I give is like being able, like, for example, not being as accepted by peers, especially, because they're not able to verbalize yet. They're not able to communicate. Some of them not even non-verbally. What are some of the strategies you use or coping skills you teach them to deal with that, to build resiliency? Because it's, there's kids that get bullied.
I know. I see kind of two scenarios: the bullying, and then I become the assistant to the child I don't really like, but this child loves having somebody who's just following them around, and so I can't get to choose what we play or speak up if I don't want to do something or make other friends. Like, those are the two dynamics that I see the most. I try to first educate parents and teachers a lot to be very vigilant of these type of scenarios, but I also try to create like kind of like check-ins with parents and children where, like, every now and then, like, how are things going with this person, like, to make sure that the child is communicating at least to the parents about it, because we will have to intervene. If we wait until the child has a voice, who knows how much time is going to pass by. But, like, to make sure that adults are protecting a child if the child is in a place where they can't really, like, advocate for themselves.
Yeah, no. And being very strategic to buddy them up. Sometimes the kids, like you said, they'll bond with someone that talks for them and does for them. And as we're trying to build those skills and help them become a more confident verbal communicator, social verbal communicator, they don't need them as much. And that other person loses their role and they'll want to hold them even more. So I see what you're saying. We see this a lot. So trying to purposely buddy them up with other friends and having get-togethers with other friends so that they start to branch out and helping them realize, all right, that child because sometimes kids aren't treated nicely. I see this as they get a little bit older, or a friend or friends they had are no longer interested because they're interested in other things. So that causes them to feel bad about themselves. So dealing with this or teaching them to advocate for themselves, like self-advocacy and independence, is a big part of resiliency.
100%. And sometimes kids go to, like, for example, like at the Chapman Institute, we have like Brave Bodies, which is like a group type of therapy. And so they meet kids who are struggling through the same. They can connect in a way where they don't feel so alone with their symptoms, right? It's like, I'm not the only one. And this child seems really cool. And this child has a hard time speaking as well. So that makes me feel better about myself.
Yeah, that we call that, as you know, social identity, to be able to connect with somebody else that's going through exactly what I'm going through, whether you're a parent or your child. It absolutely is. It's a beautiful thing to see too, when they do see that. And I always say progress doesn't happen in a group except for Communicamp, which is our intensive group, because they feel safe there. It's like, it's like they feel safe because, wow, they also are having a difficult time. And it's like, wow, we're all together in this, and it makes them feel better actually about themselves and willing to take risks. I think, like, one of the things I'd like to talk about is the protective factors as parents. We do maybe overprotection sometimes, where we're worried so much for our kids that we buffer them and hold them in, and that prevents resiliency.
Well, that creates this notion of, you have a problem. This is actually scary. You cannot do it, right? Like, sometimes I have this experience where let's tell a child who's like, doesn't have severe symptoms, who can already come to the office without the parent. And so I'll say, like, whatever, like, Mary, come in. And I don't make eye contact. I just start walking. And then I see the parent like, are you okay? Do you feel okay? Are you sure you can do it? And then all of a sudden the child was ready to walk in, and now that the parent's response scares them, and now they start questioning, maybe I can't come into the office, right? And so we need to be very cautious of that, because we want to validate. We don't want to be like, what's wrong with you? This is not a big deal. I understand that this feels really hard. And we got this. We can do it together. And I know that, I know you will be able to overcome this, right? Like, so you validate the experience and you push for growth.
Yeah. And by meeting them, as you said, where they're at. So I think it's about not just bouncing back, but learning to navigate their anxiety and teaching them the skills. So if they're feeling anxious, meditation, even, like I teach the little guys can do little box breathing, right? That's a
Yes.
way for them
Yes.
to cope when they're feeling anxious or dysregulated, and being able to recognize the feelings, within themselves. So I think we talked about a lot. I wrote a lot of stuff down. We talked about the tolerance of uncertainty and discomfort and being able to be okay with it, but to be able to figure out what can I do to make this easier next time, and that it's growth. The recovery from setbacks, that, okay, I wasn't able to do this, but look what I was able to do. Anything you want to add to anything I'm saying?
They're very little, as because we discussed, they don't have like that much metacognition. You focus much more on like the exposures and so on. But as they get older, you can go much more into the thinking traps, right? Like, my brain is telling me that this is going to be horrible and they're going to make fun of me, but are they really? Is there enough evidence for that? Is this a thinking trap? And you start working much more cognitively with them, right? So that for so many of us, even adults, believe that a thought is a fact, right? Like, if I think you hate me, you hate me. I don't know if you hate me. I don't have any evidence for that. This is just a thought come like a thinking trap, right? And to start challenging that, I think, can be also very empowering for kids.
So with the little guys, one of the things I think you're sharing is more giving words for their feelings to help them identify as they're young, because they don't have the skills yet to be able to figure it all out developmentally. So we'll train parents to give them word. That seemed frustrating for you. And starting to help them understand what they're feeling, and to be able to say, that seemed easier. This seemed easier now. That wasn't as scary. And so we use a lot of feeling scales and things like that to help them begin to relate to things being hard or scary. Little guys tend to feel scared. But teaching the parents to give them the words for their feelings, and to be able to drum, different ways to get out their feelings helps them as well. I'm sure you see that too. And then
with my daughter, just a quick example, I used to use, there's this children's book, something like The Little Train That Could, like the little train that
oh
could.
yeah,
Like,
oh my God, that's my the little engine that could.
That one.
That's
And
my
so remember
favorite
how she's like,
book.
I think I can, I think I can,
Yes.
I think I can, as she's going up. I would use that metaphor. Like, remember the little engine, blah, blah, blah. I think you can. Tell yourself, I think I can, I think I can. Like, you find things that have meaning for them, right?
Oh, that's my favorite book. Whenever anybody has a baby, I give them that book to read, because I read that to my kids, because you're right. And first of all, you can only do what you believe you can do too.
Right.
And so we have to convey, yes, this is hard, but look at all we're doing and look how far we've come. So I do that a lot in session, where we'll, even for like 5-year-olds, like when we first started like working together, look where we were, look what we're doing now. And it's like you help them realize, whoa, I've come far. And you start to see them sit up.
And I would see my daughter, like, if we were going somewhere when she was going to try to talk, she would tell herself, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, like, to herself, like, as a skill,
This has been great. This is a great topic. Anything else you want to say to our listeners? Because I know we need to wrap up. We talked about a lot of stuff.
I would just say that I think that selective mutism is, like, we have really good treatments for it now. And kids can make a lot of progress, and they're, they will get better with the right treatment, and that parents should be very hopeful about that, and that they have it's one of these treatments where parents can make a big difference. It's not just like an antibiotic. Like, you can actually make a big difference in your child's life.
And it is about the parents changing and their ways and understanding how to read their child. It's not about cure my child. They have to be actively involved in this process, as kids will not overcome it. It's not about just the child, it's the parents and the teachers.
If you only do one exposure a week in therapy, that's not going to get you that far. But if your parents continue over the week, then you will make a lot of progress.
Yeah, no, this was great. And I loved officially meeting you.
Likewise. And this is great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much. So share, Dr. Weder, where people can find you online and so forth.
So I'm a child psychiatrist at the Child Mind Institute, and my, the website is childmind.org. And if they type my name, I'll be right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so nice meeting you.
You too. Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Unspoken Words, a Selective Mutism podcast hosted by me, Dr. E, and the Smart Center. This episode and all episodes of Unspoken Words is produced by New Edition Productions. Don't forget to submit any questions you have from today's episode using our Ask Dr. E form on our website. Just head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask DRE. I'd love to answer your question in a future episode or blog post. Remember, for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, please follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast on Instagram and Unspoken Words by DRE on YouTube. Or join our newsletter for additional SM content. We release new episodes every other Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time.